Coming up on We're Speaking, the war on facts.
Propaganda works. This is the lesson of history.
So why aren't we learning that lesson? Professor Jennifer Mercieca joins us live to talk politics and rhetoric. And we're debuting Rhetoric. Learn how to spot the weaponization of language. Plus, meet the best of the worst when it comes to peddling propaganda. This week's Oh for Fuck's Sake nominees. We're Speaking starts right now.
Hey everyone.
Everybody. Welcome to the Lincoln Project's We're Speaking. I'm Lisa Senecal. I am here with the amazing Maya May.
Me, hi, how are you? I was laughing because I was like, I wanted to jam out to that. I was like, dun, dun, dun. Like every time I hear that guitar, I'm like, dun, dun, dun. I want to be in a rock band.
You could be in a rock band. You're cool enough to be in a rock band. I cannot pull it off.
Thank you for saying that. I appreciate that. So we are misinformation, disinformation. That is what we are talking about tonight. And so you know that telephone game?
That awful telephone game? Yes.
Yeah.
That
from no, not when somebody.
School.
Yeah, not when somebody ghosts you. I'm not that telephone game. Hate that telephone game. No, me neither. But the game that we used to play where somebody would say something in somebody else's ear, you'd whisper it into somebody else's ear, which gross, right? Hopefully not doing that anymore. And then it would get to the last person. And what would come out would be completely unintelligible. Everybody would like crack up, like fall out on the floor laughing. Fox News is that nonsensical sentence that gets spit out at the end of a telephone game.
They definitely are, but it's no fun. It is not a good time that they're doing this because they're doing it intentionally. It's completely purposeful. It's not a mistake that by the time it comes out of Tucker Carlson's mouth, it is what it is. It's exactly what he wants it to be. And, it sounds crazy, but Carlson and Trump and the whole right-wing wacko media ecosphere, it is all intentional. And it's not even original because demagogues have been doing this kind of stuff for as long as there have been demagogues. And they do it because it works, right? You gotta put the fear in people so you can control the masses. Yeah. And that's what they're doing.
Yeah. And who are some of the people in the past that we can compare this to? Because there's somebody that's...
Well, Tucker Carlson, I wrote a piece about this last week, which I love the opportunity, any opportunity to go off on Tucker Carlson because it needs to happen all the time. The guy's a fascist and he's a white nationalist propagandist. He is in the mold of Hitler's minister of propaganda, Joseph Goebbels. And we need to be super clear on that. And I know people are hesitant to ever make any comparisons to Nazi Germany. And I get that, but we are heading down that manipulative path and Tucker Carlson's leading the way.
Yeah, and it sounds like paranoia, like when you say it out loud, but then we also saw that there was an insurrection on our Capitol. And so we ask ourselves, like, how do we get here, right? So I want you to take a look at this. It's the ADL pyramid of hate to understand why what happens on Fox News goes from lies to violence. And I remember learning about this in 8th grade. It starts at the bottom, biased attitudes, then graduates to acts of bias, followed by discrimination, then bias-motivated violence, and then at the top of the pyramid is genocide. So January 6th was a real-world example of how inflammatory language can rile people up and get them to actually be violent. And so, and furthermore, also this, there was a survey, I don't know if y'all remember this survey, but 39% of Republicans believe in violence to take back their country. This was according to an American Enterprise Institute survey, which was reported by NPR, Political, a lot of really good sources. So this is stuff that we need to pay attention to.
Yeah, and you know my attempt to spin that into less horrifying, I can't say into anything good, is that at least that 39% of Republicans represents a smaller group of people than were self-identified Republicans 6 months, 9 months ago. But it's still a huge number of people who are willing to resort to violence in this country now. And yeah, I mean, we already saw it. Tucker Carlson, he uses these tactics to change hearts and minds for the worse. And it primes people to be activated, and in those really, really dangerous ways. And so the insurrection was one real world example of the damage that Carlson has caused. And not just Carlson, it's a whole lot more folks than that, but he certainly is, individual one in this case.
Yep.
But, he did it with COVID. You call it a hoax enough times, you discourage people from getting vaccinated, and now people are literally dying. It wasn't, they weren't satisfied being responsible for enough COVID deaths before we had a vaccine. Now that we have a vaccine, they've got to see how many more Americans they can manage to kill by putting out false information.
Yeah, and these are people who didn't have to die. Like, that's the thing. Like, the vast majority of the people dying right now are people who are unvaccinated. And so it's a shame he lied about that. He also lied about critical race theory. And believe it or not, that's led to violence too. Fist fights, angry meetings, school board meetings, and even worse, I don't know, a whole new generation of Karens are rising. There was a tiny 9-year-old, I believe, in Minnesota, who went to her school board meeting and said, I don't want to see any Black Lives Matters posters at my school. You said that we weren't going to have any political speech. And she was 9 years old.
Yeah, that we think it's political speech now to say that America should deliver on the promises that America has made since its inception. And we didn't do it from the inception of this country. But now we think this is a left versus right, equality, equity. This is something that we can no longer teach our children. I saw right before we came on the show today, a whole list of words that are going to be words and phrases that are going to be banned and identified. These are the ways you can find out if critical race theory is being taught in your elementary, middle, and high schools, where it's never been taught because it's a college level discussion. But it was things like identity. If they say identity in the school, that means
that's critical race theory. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It's a broad, it's a very
that feels
broad,
like a microaggression.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, wait, I can't say that word anymore.
No, that's right. That was on the list as well, too. That's right. As was equality and equity. We are also no longer allowed to say. Very, very, very bad. We're going to have a hard time talking about Martin Luther King Day next year. Yeah. But the echo chamber, they're primed, and Carlson is able to churn this stuff out. It gets repeated really quickly. Another one of these was around the January 6th insurrection. Now, apparently, the FBI is behind it. And that's why there are unnamed co-conspirators in indictments, because, of course, those must be FBI agents. I mean, the logical fallacies that Carlson goes through in rapid succession to get his followers to a point where somehow it seems rational and reasonable, because they don't push back and because they're not getting sources outside the bubble.
Yeah, it's a terrible bubble. I always bubbles are supposed to be good. Like, when I think of little kids running around with bubbles, that's happy. They've ruined bubbles. Fox News has ruined bubbles. They're programming, it's intended to program its listeners so they can direct them as they will. That's how I see it.
Yeah, and then there's the othering, right? And that's a lot of what critical race theory is about. And this is another parallel to Nazi Germany, right? The othering of the Jews, that you can put them in a category and begin to work toward them being less than and inferior and undesirable. And do we really want them to be able to have any power and control in a society because they're inferior? So we can't be controlled by inferior people. And that's like moving you up on that ADL pyramid in a really terrifying way. When you start to dehumanize people, you end up at genocide. That's where that leads. So, it's exactly what Carlson's now doing with Black and brown Americans. And, as I was saying before, it's intentional. He knows exactly what he's doing, and he knows damn well what it could lead to.
Yeah, he sure does.
Yeah. We are just horrified by this stuff, but we have to pay a lot of attention to it. We fortunately had the opportunity this week to have a sit down with Steve Schmidt. We're going to be dropping his knowledge bombs throughout the show tonight, but we wanted to share one with you now where Steve discusses Tucker Carlson.
If Tucker Carlson talked about the things he talks about on Fox News Tonight in 1965, you would have had tens of millions of Americans who fought the fascists in the Second World War would have instantly recognized it, and he would have been thrown off of TV. The reality is the things that he's espousing are the philosophies that killed 100 million people by the middle of the 20th century.
Disinformation. I mean, it's right there.
Yeah, it's so scary that, we used to ask ourselves, like, how could that have happened in Germany? Like, why weren't there people who spoke up? Why didn't people see the incremental stuff that was going on? How could that ever happen? It could never happen here. Who would stand up against it? Well, we're seeing now a lot of people go along.
Yeah. I mean, it's damaging our democracy, and that's the bottom line. It's killing people, from January 6th denial to minimizing COVID and attacking critical race theory. The list goes on.
And so we asked you, what is the cumulative effect of all these lies? And as always, you guys really came through. So we're going to share a few with you. Liz Van Buskirk, discontinuity. I am unable to get a grip on any rational explanation for all of the lies and hate being spewed. And yet they continue on and on. What a bunch of crooks. Or are they all insane? I wish.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. We've got Joseph Hammers on Facebook who says, normally the lying would have no impact on intelligent thinking people. The problem is when the lying is amplified by network nuts such as Fox News, OAN, etc., and the people follow those network nuts with no thought of challenging the lies, then the lies take hold and grow. What needs to happen is the believers of those lies must somehow be deprogrammed. Yep, we got deprogramming.
Yeah, not an easy thing to accomplish. Janny Joe wrote, Fox Propaganda TV is the gateway drug to OAN and the rest of the insurrectionist, domestic terrorism supporting right-wing media. With you there, Janny Joe.
Yeah. And then we have Michael Johnson on Facebook. Studying disinformation campaigns should be required curriculum in high school. While many look at Roger Stone as pure genius in the political world, the more accurate depiction of his career is one of evil genius. I know this is preaching to the choir, but the dangerousness of these behaviors is what makes this stuff harmful and deadly, as we've already seen, and should not be protected from the First Amendment. For me, the First Amendment protections cease once the speech inflicts civil rights violations. Keep up the good work, Lincoln Project. We will. America needs you. They do.
Yeah, they do. And we need all of you. We love that you guys are so participatory with all of the asks that we put out there. It's amazing to get everything that you send in to us. So because we're not just a show and we're really a community, your input is crucial to building this movement. And it is a movement.
It is a movement. Yeah, if you like our show, smash that like button, share it with your friends, and also don't forget to follow us. You can use the hashtag We're Speaking, and you can tag us on Twitter. What are you at on Twitter, Lisa?
I am at LC Senecal, and also follow at LPTV.
Yep.
And then
you can find my on stage, but in my living room right now. Not on
And we got to keep the conversation going because, yeah, it is for some of us preaching to the choir, but the choir does get preached to, and there's a reason for it. It's important. That message just has to keep getting said over and over again. And then the choir is motivated to go out and spread the word further. So you guys are doing the Lord's work. So thank you for all the times that you participate with us. We get to do one of our favorite parts of the show now. Maya and I have been attending a wonderful ceremony each week now to honor a few incredibly deserving folks. And so right now we are going to share with you the first of our Oh For Fuck's Sake nominees this week.
Our first nominee is a person we don't want to give too much attention to because, so I'll say his name real softly. His name sounds like the villain in a movie about a cheesy frat boy whose evil plan is to round up hundreds of thousands of people for execution so he can throw a party, the GOP. Guess what? It's not a movie. It's literally what he wants to do. Pearson Sharp, what a great American.
Yeah. We want them to be comic book villains, but they're out there in our country influencing people. It is just amazing. You looked amazing, by the way, at that.
Thank you. The only time I dress up is for the Ox Awards now. It's the only thing I get to do.
Yep. Yeah, I feel you. So earlier this week, we did speak with the one and only Steve Schmidt about misinformation, disinformation, the future of democracy, just kind of important stuff. And as I said before, we're going to keep dropping Steve knowledge bombs throughout the show as only Steve can drop them. And we've got another one for you right now.
Nothing good blooms in the totalitarian soil, so to speak. We live in an age, though, today where you don't need the type of coercive force to control a population. Technology does it for you.
Yeah, that's scary, and it's true. When he said that, I was like, "Whoa, that's true." Nothing good grows in totalitarian soil, but it's not just technology that's doing it. Unfortunately, coming up next, we're going to be talking to professor, historian, and author of "Demagogue for President: The Rhetorical Genius of Donald Trump." Jennifer Mercieca is now working on a book about propaganda, and she'll join us to talk about the damage our country and others are facing in the war against facts and science. It's a lot of them. So we'll be right back after this message from the Lincoln Project.
I am proud to lead my colleagues in filing a bill to censure President Joe Biden.
We live clean lives, Sean, and every single day we're attacked by political hacks. Every single day they come after us and they subpoena us and they try and find a comma that's out of place. But this guy can go sleep with hookers.
He had a picture of his manhood and multiple M&M candies stacked along it. Just some really weird stuff.
Why do we laugh at Alex Jones again? Sincere question.
A few minutes ago, my father's law license was suspended. This is unacceptable. I stand by my father. He did everything ultimately by the book.
We're also thrilled to be joined by a person who's actually loved. You don't necessarily hear that, but she's loved and respected, and she's tough and smart and kind. Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene.
He's not just a pig, he's stupid.
Whether you're a woman, you're LGBTQ, XYZ, whatever.
What happens to all these people who were responsible for overthrowing the election? In the past, America had a very good solution for dealing with such traitors: execution.
If you care about law and order,
Wow, welcome back. You're still here. Awesome. For those of you who just got here, tonight we are speaking about the erosion of critical thinking. No one's thinking anymore, and its impact on our democracy and our people.
And how information shared and received plays a huge part in that. Our guest tonight has spent a career studying how words matter.
Yes, I am so excited to have tonight's guest on. Jennifer Mercieca is a professor of Texas A&M University. There she is. And she's written articles with titles like Dangerous Demagogues and Weaponized Communication and the Emergence of the Outrage Presidency. And she wrote a book that the Washington Post called one of the most important political books of this perilous summer. Jennifer, hello. We're excited to have you on the show.
Hi, you're very kind. Thanks for having me.
Oh,
yeah,
great to have you here.
Yeah, and love the titles of everything that you do. They're so much fun. Speaking of Demagogue for President, you mentioned in the book that Trump didn't just use rhetoric, that he weaponized it. And it kind of blew my mind because I'd never heard that said before. Can you help me put my mind back together? It's in pieces.
Sorry to do that to you. So part of the argument of my book is that Donald Trump took advantage of a crisis in the American public sphere. So we had crisis levels of distrust, of polarization, and of frustration in the United States, and we still do, probably. And he took advantage of that by using rhetoric, using language as a weapon to attack the nation. And so the way that he described it was that he was a counterpuncher, right? That he was just, firing back at people who insulted him or, whatever. But in fact, he really was usually the first one to land a punch. He was routinely using rhetoric as a weapon.
Maya and I were talking about this earlier because you know that we have been devouring your book and your articles. And one of the questions that we had was, it is delicious. Knowledge. So can marginalized people get away with weaponizing rhetoric the way someone like Donald Trump can? There seems to be a real connection to having power and being able to not get, I guess, as the right-wing media sphere likes to say now, to get canceled, which is another term that they stole.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Donald Trump broke all the rules, right? So I don't think we could, together of us, count all the times that everyone thought Donald Trump can't possibly continue in the presidential race. He said something so outrageous, so terrible, so offensive that, for sure, the Republican Party will abandon him. It just happened repeatedly over and over and over during the 2016 election, of course, while he was in office, and he still uses strategies that are designed, right, to provoke outrage. And you're right, if it was anybody else, it wouldn't have worked for them. They wouldn't have got away with it. And so there's definitely a power differential there. And that being said, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, because you made a distinction in your book that I thought was super interesting about rhetoric to coerce versus to persuade. And it seems like that's something that he is an expert at. And I think about people like Obama, who kind of spoke and inspired hope. And when Lisa and I were talking, that was who we were talking about. It was like, Obama could never get away with this. This is why he had to have an anger translator. It's like he had to be reserved in his speech. And so that's, to me, I'm very fascinated about that aspect of it, obviously, because I often worry about being the angry Black woman. So.
Yeah, I mean, so just to take one example between Obama and Trump. So Barack Obama was the first president to really adopt social media as a strategy. He did it in 2008, to organize people. He was on Facebook. He still, has the largest or one of the largest accounts on Twitter. But when his social media team talked about their strategy online, what they thought was that they wanted to share good information, positive information about the things that were happening in the White House so that they could speak directly to the public, and that they really wanted to keep it positive because they felt like the winning strategy online was to keep it positive so that people would want to share your content, stuff that they were proud of. Right. So if you can imagine translating that theory of social media usage to Trump and his campaign and his presidency, it's almost the exact opposite. Right. He wanted to spark outrage. He wanted people to engage with his messages because they were so terrible, not because they were proud of them.
So we're now back to a portion of the Obama administration now with Joe Biden in the White House. And is there something that Biden is doing that has the ability through his communications, that has the ability to at all neutralize the messages coming out of the Fox News, OAN, the Tucker Carlsons and Trump to the degree that he still has the ability to get in front of folks? Because Biden's taking a very different approach. He is not stoking outrage. He's really talking about bringing people together. And can that compete with the ferocity of the anger and hate that's being fomented?
Yeah, I think that it can. And I actually think that it's a really smart strategy. I think maybe Democrats would want to see him engage in battle, online or whatever. But if it's true, and I think it is, that the right-wing media ecosystem has an overarching narrative that says that politics is war, Democrats cheat, they're the enemy, and we can't trust them or anything that they say, then the best antidote to that is to not participate in the war, right? Is to not escalate and prove, with every thing that you say that you are the enemy and that you are in a war against them. Right. And so his media strategy to me seems to be to, again, sort of try to provide good information to the American public about what they're doing, what their agenda is, and to constantly remind them that they're here to serve all Americans, that they're, not trying to hurt anybody with their plans, that they're trying to pass policies that will help the greatest number of people, things like the infrastructure bill that they're working on. Those are things that are designed to neutralize that, big lie or that overarching narrative that's being told constantly and has been told constantly, for the last 30 years on the right.
So we can't win the war of words by fighting back. That's what you're saying. You've got with angry words.
Well, yeah, not with angry words, right? And so, if you think about it, it is a frame war. So the Biden frame is that politics and political communication are about finding common ground and solving political problems. And the right-wing media ecosystem and politicians, their frame is that politics is war and you can't trust the other side and they're evil. So, it is a frame war, right? They are doing battle, but the one frame is negating the war and saying that it's actually not warfare.
Okay.
So he is fighting, just not in the way that you would see overtly.
I like it.
It's subtle. But it's actually working, right? So if you look at opinion polls about support for Biden, particularly among Republicans, he just doesn't activate hatred the way that Obama did or Hillary Clinton does, right? And so there's something about what he's doing that's working, I think.
Yeah, I hope so. So Trump came in at a moment in time, sort of in reaction to Obama, largely, who he had started villainizing before the man ever became president. So he had a long track record going after him. But was this a perfect moment? Were there forces coming together that kind of made Donald Trump the right, angry, hateful, weaponizing rhetoric monster to have run for president in that moment? I mean, was he the man for that moment the way we hope Biden is the man for this moment?
Yeah, in some ways he was. I mean, if you think about the fact that there were, I don't know, 16, 17 Republican candidates in that election in 2016, and that Trump was the one who eventually won the nomination, beating out people who had experience as governors, as senators, that kind of stuff. It seems really far-fetched. If you were to write that as a political novel, your editor would be like, not sure. Not sure that's going to happen, really. So it was really, I think, improbable. And so you have to ask, well, then why? And I think part of it is that context, the historic, again, really historic levels of distrust and polarization, frustration. But then also Trump's rhetorical strategies that intentionally took advantage of all of those things. And then you have to throw in the fact that the media gave him $1 billion in free airtime, knowing that putting the camera in front of him as much as they did was bad for democracy, but good for ratings. You have to add that to it. You have to add the fact that the Republican Party wasn't able to stop him, right? So if you look at what political science would say about how to prevent a demagogue from ever becoming president, what they'll tell you is that the party nomination process should winnow away, right? That, the media should be able to sort of endorse who's a good candidate versus who isn't, giving them media airtime, sort of authorizes them and their credibility, and that the process itself would winnow out somebody like Donald Trump, who has no experience and who didn't have, goodwill for the American public. But that didn't happen.
Yeah. And it's interesting when you bring up $1 billion industry, because Facebook now, they've got a $1 trillion market cap. And it sounds like making us angry is making people money. And you talked about previously about Noam Chomsky's manufactured consent, but now it's all about manufactured dissent. So why do they want us so angry, and why are they able to use words to do it?
Yeah, so this is what I'm working on now with my new book. So the original propaganda model, so propaganda is communication for warfare. It's designed to demoralize the enemy, and it's really a tool, right? It's another kind of weapon in a war, and that's how it was developed during World War I. And the people, even in the United States, who developed it, people like Edward Bernays, Walter Lippmann, they were very forthcoming about the fact that they didn't trust the people, they didn't trust public opinion, and they thought instead that they should use propaganda, later called public relations, but that they should use these strategies, to inform the people and educate them in a way that would manufacture consent. So not actual consent where you give good information to people, to manufacture consent. Yeah. Because not good information, right? Like you're not giving them what they need to make informed decisions and independent, decision-making, that kind of thing. Instead, you're rendering them docile. And so when someone like Herman and Chomsky wrote about manufacturing consent using the words that they had used, it was really about the fact that, these industries had emerged that allowed government, corporations, whoever, parties, to keep us separate and docile. And they called that the manufacturing of consent. Well, that worked, it worked really well for them throughout the 20th century. But as you get towards the end of the 20th century, of course, you have the emergence of participatory media and the emergence of what they call the outrage industry. And so that's talk radio, which is very participatory. And then, of course, that is the internet, cable news, all of those things. And they realized that we weren't going to be quiet anymore. Instead, we wanted to participate in politics, in the public sphere. And so the new propaganda model is what I think of as manufacturing dissent. And again, it's not actual dissent, like, the same way that they weren't actually consenting in the first place. It's propaganda strategies, it's manufacturing. And so, now we're set in motion. We're set in motion to use the power that we all have via social media to rage and to trample and, to outrage and to, eventually attack the Capitol. And that's the plan, right? They sort of keep us docile in a different way by causing so much chaos. It's equally undemocratic.
It sure is. And this is all super fascinating stuff. We have to go to a break, but we're not going to let you go just yet, because when we come back, we actually want to show our audience how to actually do a little bit of this. We're going to school, learning how to identify these different rhetorical devices when they're weaponized, which we're calling rhetorics. So we are going to go to a break.
Yeah, we've got a few clips that we're going to share with you that we've pulled from the news and have you identify what the rhetorics are that are being used in them. But first, we're going to take a quick break, and we need to introduce another one of our Oh For Fuck's Sake award nominees for this week.
Our next OFFS nominee is Eric, the Prince of Immoral Conservatives. He has played many dramatic roles, this dark Eric Prince, former Navy SEAL, the founder and ex-head of security for Blackwater. He even played the leading man when he violated international law to try to overthrow an internationally recognized government. But recently, the government he's trying to overthrow is our very own. What an overachiever. He recruited ex-spies to infiltrate liberal groups to gather the goods and spread lies. It's like stealing your rival's mascot in high school, but if you also burn down their school and disenfranchise their parents and turn the whole town into an authoritarian blackened hellscape run by billionaires. Boy, have you earned this, bruh. And the cherry on top, your sister is Betsy DeVos. Gross.
Hi, just wanted to leave a message for you all. Really appreciate your work and all that you're doing to save our democracy and shine a light on what's going on. Commenting on the Facebook post that's asking about where we get our information. That's a tricky question, but I think it's very important to be careful about differentiating between print media and other forms of media. So I really try to rely on the New York Times, the Washington Post, Reuters, Politico. I know is a little left-leaning. The Atlantic is doing some great stuff, but these are print journalists. I think we feel like we've lost a lot with the rise of the internet, but I think we're getting it back. People still have a desire to consume print media, but I think it's real important, and also to differentiate the work of what journalists do and what historians are doing. So I really follow people like Heather Cox Richardson, and her letters from an American have really been enlightening, but she's clear to point out that she's not a journalist. Her job is to interpret the truth. Journalists' jobs are to write about it and reveal it. So again, I appreciate everything that you're doing. You guys have a special place in this process, and keep up what you're doing. Thanks so much.
Welcome back. We are here with Jennifer Mercieca, who's speaking with us about the state of disinformation in our country and misinformation. There is a word war being waged, and we want the Lincoln Project community to have the tools to win. People like Tucker Carlson not only spread dis and misinformation, but they're weaponizing the words to do it.
Yeah, it's word wizardry is the way I like to call it. It's like they've gone to Hogwarts. But no, seriously, words are used to program, right? So it casts a spell on whoever's listening. And so we want to show all of y'all, now that we have an expert with us here, how these tricks work, these rhetorical tricks. We're calling them rhetoric tricks. So Jennifer, we're going to show you a few examples. And then if you could break it down for our viewers, which device is being used. Sounds good? We're going to do that? All right.
This is my dream come true.
Yay!
Hey,
mine too.
I know.
We are aligned in this.
Yeah, we geek out on this. This is fun.
Yeah, we do. So our first clip is from last week when the chairman of Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Mark Milley, defended members of the military studying critical race theory, and then we'll hear Tucker's response to Milley.
I've read Mao Zedong. I've read Karl Marx. I've read Lenin. That doesn't make me a communist. So what is wrong with understanding, having some situational understanding about the country for which we are here to defend? And I personally find it offensive that we are accusing the United States military, our general officers, our commissioned, non-commissioned officers, of being, quote, woke.
He's not just a pig, he's stupid.
Wow.
I know. It doesn't matter how many times I hear Tucker Carlson say that. It is such a gut punch. It is incredibly shocking that he would call this man a pig.
Yeah.
But
what device? Yeah.
Rhetoric trick.
But it's purposeful. It's purposeful. What is it?
Yeah. So calling a person an animal is called reification, treating people as objects, dehumanizing them. It's typically a war rhetoric strategy, so used to prepare a nation to murder and kill. And if you think about it, if another group of people are not actually people, they don't deserve rights, they don't have any standing, they certainly don't deserve to be protected. And, if they're bad people, they're doing bad things, then, we would be motivated to want to kill them. So, it's one of the main features of war rhetoric.
That's scary.
It is scary. We heard Trump do it constantly by calling people dogs. It was one of his go-to insults. All right, the next clip is from 2016 when Trump was, I'm just saying that Ted Cruz's father, might have had something to do with the assassination of JFK. Here's the clip.
All I did is point out the fact that on the cover of the National Enquirer, there was a picture of him and crazy Lee Harvey Oswald having breakfast. Now, Ted never denied that it was his father. Instead, he said, Donald Trump, I had nothing to do with it. This was a magazine that, frankly, in many respects, should be very respected. They got OJ, they got Edwards, they got
this. The National Enquirer is the magazine.
Great source.
Yes.
Yeah, this is one of the stories I tell in my book, and it's actually hilarious. So the picture, they're not having breakfast. In the picture, it's this black and white picture. There's two random men standing on a street holding a flyer. So first of all, he's using hyperbole. He's circulating innuendo, but saying, I didn't say it, right? So I'm not saying, I'm just saying. That's paralipsis, the rhetorical figure of saying two things at once and saying the thing that you say you're not saying while you're saying it. Then, of course, Ted Cruz did deny it. And the story of the provenance of how the National Enquirer got that story is actually interesting as well. There's basically one random guy with a blog, and that random guy with a blog got on InfoWars. And then from InfoWars, the story goes to the National Enquirer. And then, of course, Trump then platforms it and it becomes a national news item. And propaganda scholars call that narrative laundering, where you take, a dirty story, a fact. Yeah, I know, it's a good one. You take something that is sketchy, right, from some random guy in his blog, and you all of a sudden launder it through several sources. And then, it comes out from someone and you think, oh, maybe that's credible. Right. Who knows? That happens all the time.
I'm like, you have no idea. This is tickling my brain so much. I'm like, did you hear that, everybody? Narrative laundering, paralysis.
Laundering. I love that term.
So good. Okay, our last clip is from a couple of weeks ago when Tucker shared a conspiracy theory that FBI agents were among the insurrectionists on January 6th.
Person 2 and Person 3 were organizers of the riot. The government knows who they are, but the government has not charged them. Why is that? You know why. They were almost certainly working for the FBI. So FBI operatives were organizing the attack on the Capitol on January 6th, according to government documents.
Did we hear that? I don't know that we heard that.
My favorite part of that clip is we don't know why. You know why.
You have all the answers.
That's the best part. So it's conspiracy rhetoric, and conspiracy rhetoric is fascinating to me because it's self-sealing, and this is something I've been talking about lately, which means that narrative is not allowed to be punctured. So if you imagine a tire that you have on your car or your bike, you run over a nail and you can keep driving, like the air doesn't come out, somehow it magically seals up. Well, conspiracy works the same way. You can't puncture the hole in the story. So if you say, there is no plot, they say they don't want you to know. The conspiracists won't tell you the truth. If you deny the facts, they say they're suppressing the evidence. Why won't they let us talk about this? Don't they believe in free speech? They're so un-American, right? And so anything that you say that could possibly discount the narrative is treated as confirmation of the fact that the conspiracy actually exists. It's turned around so that it proves it. So all of those questions that he asked and answered, those were all the sort of language of conspiracy. Why is that? You know why. You can't trust them. Again, that sort of big lie narrative that says that, there is a plot, politics is war and they cheat. All of that is embedded in that narrative. And then, of course, the whole argument hinges on a misunderstanding, I assume a deliberate misunderstanding of what an unindicted co-conspirator is, right? Like, that's not what that is. Yeah, but, it sounds good. It sounds dangerous or something. I don't know.
Right. And you're absolutely right. He knows what he's doing. He knows what an unindicted co-conspirator is. And if the rest of Fox News believed that this was really like that would be a hell of a scoop, right? If Tucker Carlson figured out that the FBI was behind this, but it doesn't get reported. Not just other places. It doesn't get reported anywhere else on Fox News. Like nobody else will talk about that on Fox News because that's how out of line it is, but nobody will stop Tucker from doing it either because money's coming in, right? Yeah.
It's a pretty good sign.
Jennifer, this is, I wish we could go through like 2 more dozen clips because it's
me too.
Yeah, this is so helpful for people to begin to understand it and like the futility of arguing against some of it as well, as you just explained.
Yeah, I really wish that people could see communication the way a communication professor does, right? Which is, analytically. I just see strategies. I just hear moves. It's very, sort of separate from who I am or what I think, right? I'm just constantly analyzing, the rhetorical strategies. And I wish more people could do that. I think that would be helpful. So thank you for giving me the opportunity.
Yes, that is amazing. There's one rhetorical device that I have to ask about because the name of it, we were talking about, like, how do you say that? To quoque? To
I think
what
it's
is
tu
it?
quoque. Yeah, so that's the appeal to hypocrisy. It's a form of ad hominem attack. So when you attack the person instead of their argument, and tu quoque basically says they're all hypocrites. You know, so anytime you say like, oh, well, of course she just said, you know, those mean things about Trump, she's trying to sell a book, right? That's an appeal to hypocrisy. You can't trust me or what I've said because, you know, there's something in it for me. That is, again, a part of the big lie narrative. And it's really corrosive. I think it's the dominant figure of our public sphere. It's the reason why no one trusts anyone. We don't trust the news that we see. We don't trust, you know, members of the opposition. We don't trust, you know, branches of government, any of those things. And I think it's because we've been led to believe that everyone's a hypocrite, that everyone's lying, self-interested, all of that. And it's not the case. You know, most people are not hypocrites.
Yeah.
Well, this has been incredibly valuable, Jennifer. You were saying you wish more people could see and hear language the way you do. You've given us a real opportunity to help people do that tonight. So thank you so much for being with us and making us smarter.
My pleasure. We're nerds.
Yeah, thank you.
We're nerds.
Yay!
We're nerds unite. The world would be so much better if there were more of us. We would love to have you back anytime.
That would be my pleasure. That would be my pleasure. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So
Thank you.
check out Jennifer's book, Demagogue for President, The Rhetorical Genius of Donald Trump, and also keep an eye out because she is working on a new book as well. This feels like a really good time to drop another Steve Schmidt truth bomb on Fox News from our earlier conversation. So let's listen to what Steve has to say.
Tucker Carlson is not novel. Tucker Carlson's a middling figure out of an autocratic playbook.
Is there a way to make
but
that?
Nobody should underestimate his danger. And secondly, it's time to stop playing around. When he called General Milley a pig, right? He did it in the name of every person who showed up at work at Fox News today and at News Corp today. That's News Corp's position. That's Fox News's position. You know, the idea that, oh, we have a respected journalist who goes on TV for an hour on Sunday and that explicates the network and mitigates the moral disgrace of it all is wrong. Those journalists can go practice their craft at non-corrupt organizations. And so until and unless they do that, they own it also.
Yeah, that is a lot.
It is a lot.
A lot to take in.
Yeah,
So-
and Steve had also a few words for former House Speaker Paul Ryan, who now sits very silently on the board of Fox News.
Man was the Republican nominee for vice president. He was the Speaker of the House. He was a constitutional officer. You know, how much money are they paying him? You know, you're going to sit on the board of an organization, a nation that's been at war for 20 years. Man with 10 service hash marks up his arm, 5 years in combat zones, 42 years of active service. You're going to call him a pig? You want to stay on the board of that company? What's wrong with you, Mr. Speaker? What's wrong with you?
Yeah, what is wrong with you? Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing. Ryan is a Republican who has happily forgotten all of those so deeply held beliefs and is, you know, completely content to toss those all aside and cash in on the hate and disinformation of Tucker Carlson and Hannity and other vile folks on Fox News and, you know, Rupert Murdoch and News Corp. He'll sit there and he'll take the checks, regardless of what it's doing to the country. So it is really shameful. Paul Ryan, shame on you.
Yeah, for sure.
We might have to consider him for one of our offs nominees coming up.
Oh, most definitely. Bring him back. We do have our final offs nominee and the winner of this week's award coming up. But first, our call to action. We've learned a lot with Jennifer Mercieca tonight, so we want you to put it into action and actually call out the rhetorics when you see them on Twitter, on Facebook. The tricksters, actually, they can't do it. They can't trick if we all know the tricks. And tonight, we learned several, actually, but we don't want to inundate you with all the information, so we're just going to put 3 up here. Some of the common ones are reification, which is treating something that's abstract as if it were concrete. Paralipsis is when you give emphasis to something by professing to say little or nothing about it. And tu quoque, which is basically claiming the argument is flawed by pointing out that the person making the argument is not acting consistently with the claims of that argument. So we're going to need you to call them out. We know you're active on Twitter. We know you're active on Facebook. We see you out there. When you see these kind of arguments happening, call it out and then tag us so we can see it and we can use it in a show. Use the hashtag Rhetoritrix. Also use the hashtag We're Speaking. And yeah, we're going to learn together. We're going to win this war of words.
Yeah, knowledge is a powerful thing, and language is too. So understanding how to harness some of this and also be able to diffuse some of it is really important. So it's this. It was so exciting to have her on tonight. I know you and I were like totally nerding out. Like, oh my God. Jennifer,
I know. I was like, please stay. Yeah.
We want to make sure that we point out the absolutely don't miss content that comes from the breakdown. If you haven't been watching it with our friends Rick Wilson and Tara Setmeyer on Tuesdays and Thursday nights, you are missing out on some fiery discussions of the latest breaking political news. And you gotta check out this clip with a trigger warning.
Trigger warning.
This is quintessential Rick Wilson. So please, everyone, enjoy.
Get the kids out of the room.
Yeah, quickly.
I have never met a bigger bunch of whining baby bitch snowflake titty mamas than these MAGAs. They are the worst possible complainers in the world. They bitch about cancel culture and they run screaming if you criticize them. They beat their chests, and the minute you say something about them that they're rubes or that they're slow or they suffer from indifferent educations or chronic erectile dysfunction, they lose their goddamn minds.
Yeah. That was something else. Rick was in rare form, although that's actually not true. Rick is very often in rare form, so it's not that rare. Rick is just he is prime form.
Yeah.
You got to catch the breakdown every Tuesday and Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 5 p.m. Pacific. Tomorrow night, you are in for a treat. And now it is time for our last Offs nominee, Maya May.
Our final nominee is someone who has mastered the craft of grabbing a whole bunch of buzzwords and smushing them together to make them both less coherent and somehow more insulting to more people. Laura Ingraham. She is an amazingly awful person. She called out Mark Milley and recommended defunding the military because of inclusion. She Jedi mind chipped her way into tearing down our folks in uniform and people of color and the LGBTQ communities, all in one fell swoop. She turned being terrible into a career, and I call that a careerable. How's that for a buzzword?
A careerable. It's like opposite of a Care Bearable.
She's so horrid.
Really
welcome back, everybody. Tonight we're talking about disinformation and the damage it's doing to our democracy. There's no point in identifying the problems if we're not going to try to find solutions. And that's one of the really important things that we try to do here, is not just identify all the things that are going wrong, but empowering you folks with tools like Rhetoritrix to be able to be a part of the solution. And that's what you are as part of the Lincoln Project community.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. I love seeing how active and engaged y'all are. And we asked you this week where you find information that you trust and how you communicate with people who are lost in a web of lies. And here are some of your ideas and strategies.
Michelle Connor wrote, I listen to people more knowledgeable than myself, that's for sure. I've learned lots by reading. To me, that's always a good place to start.
Yes. And Beth Ann Stockdale, I read Heather Cox Richardson every day, NPR, BBC, New York Times, and my local ABC news station.
And Christy Tavan Hansen Long wrote, I trust political historians and research everything I read. Wow, good for you, Christy. And Kathy Hill wrote, PBS, C-SPAN, MSNBC, CNN, Fox News, only to find out what they're up to, which is important to keep an eye on.
It is. Just don't get emotionally involved. Patricia Dippo says, cut your cable and listen to NPR. NPR is always right smack in the middle of any media bias chart. Also, the stories are always more in depth and there is never anyone screaming. Yeah, screaming's a bad sign in news.
Yeah, you have to love those news sources where they have some people screaming that they're too liberal and other people screaming that they're too conservative. So, you know, okay, this might be a reasonable place to actually get news. Patricia Nicholas wrote, I start mornings with the New York Times, the Washington Post, and my local paper. Then I check Twitter for respected journalists and folks like the Lincoln Project's take on the news. Thank you. Or a more in-depth explanation. Then I reluctantly check the right for how they're spinning. Then Facebook to take the local pulse. Then I'm exhausted. I live in Southwest Florida and surrounded by MAGA Nation. I don't talk to anybody.
That does sound exhausting. I was like, she has a lot of time to spend reading the news. Wendy Clark says, I rely on NPR and AP websites, but also look at various mainstream news sites, not Fox, which I don't consider to be mainstream news. When I want more in-depth or details, I look for source material. Now, this is a good one because I like to do this one too, such as National Institute of Health publications for health and medical research. I check Snopes or similar for a first check on things that sound questionable. Same. I do that. It's time consuming, but I can't seem to do it any differently. I can't settle for some story on Facebook or a sensationalistic headline somewhere. Right on, Wendy Clark. Everybody write that down. Jot it down real quick.
Yeah, absolutely. There is so much damage being done with people just immediately being willing to retweet or share stuff on Facebook or on Instagram without checking out whether or not there is any truth to it at all. And it is a cesspool, folks. It is nasty.
Yeah, it really is. Don't multiply
She continued, when interacting with others, I just try to talk about what I've heard and where I got that information, substantiate my info with multiple credible sources, and try to use logic. Imagine that. I try not to even talk about their sources, though I've posted negative things about Fox a couple of times, haven't we all, and just present an alternative so they know it's there.
It's a robust approach, but it's definitely it's an approach that works because, you see stuff that's suspect out there. And, in the fact that we don't learn critical thinking skills in school these days, it seems that's a huge part of the problem. So please engage with some of these rhetorics. I'm going to say that as many times as I can tonight. Rhetorics. Engage with that. Use it. Hashtag rhetorics. And it will help you figure out how to engage with this stuff on a deeper level so that you can kind of call these things out. And calling out disinformation is a regular mission for Reed Galen, who is the host of the Lincoln Project podcast. Ari Berman, a senior reporter for Mother Jones and the author of Give Us the Ballot, is this week's guest. Check it out.
Democracy has to be the central unifying principle here. It's very healthy to have debates about lots of different policies, but we shouldn't be fighting over democracy itself. And to me, that's what's changed in the last decade compared to decades before this. It's fine to disagree on issues. Not even everyone has to like Joe Biden. But we need a broad consensus in favor of democracy in this country, and that's something that could unite AOC and Liz Cheney.
Yeah, definitely give it a listen. You can subscribe to the Lincoln Project podcast at Apple or wherever else you get your podcast. It's one of my favorite things to listen to, very informative. So if you like to geek out on information, please check it out there. And it's time for the winner of this week's OFFS Awards. So we're going to go over to Lisa in the grand auditorium to hear this week's winners.
And the winner of our OFFS Award this week is Laura Ingraham. Laura has mastered the craft of grabbing a whole bunch of buzzwords and smashing them all up together to make them both less coherent and somehow more insulting to more people. Her recent attack on the head of the Joint Chiefs, General Mark Milley, and her deranged battle cry to defund the military were truly inspired by white supremacist nationalism. Ingraham, currently starring in the Fox News remake of the Star Wars Cantina scene, attempted to Jedi mind trick her way into tearing down our men and women in uniform and people of color and the LGBTQ communities in one fell swoop. We expect to see her nominated soon for Best Supporting Degenerate in an American Fascist Movement. Laura was unable to be with us today. Lucky us. We might have asked Ingraham's brother to accept the award in her absence, but he can't stand her either. Congrats or something, Laura.
Wow, you look fantastic. But she's a dumpster
I have
fire.
a geyser coming out of the top of my head. That was the most ridiculous hairdo I have ever had, I think.
Yeah, I want to know who does your OFFS Awards looks, because they're getting better every week. They're crushing. So I'm looking forward to seeing.
It's a large team. I'll have to my chief stylist Fezzik, I will have to introduce everybody to. He's got a lot of hair of his own, so he's gotten good at dealing with mine.
Can't wait till I let your dog do my hair.
That's right.
We have come to the end of our show, y'all. I was reading this past week that part of the reason we don't want to tackle climate change is because it seems so complex. And I think a lot can be said in the same vein when it comes to all of this misinformation and distrust and social justice. Like, it's so overwhelming. And we want to save our democracy. And so we want to use this last little bit of the show to tell you that everything is going to be okay. The solution is actually quite simple: critical thought, voter turnout, shining a spotlight on voter suppression tactics and the legislators that support them. But most importantly, remember, y'all, our democracy is strong, but it's only as strong as you are. So we need you to work.
Yeah. We do. I mean, there's that saying that, arc of the moral universe bends toward justice, but it doesn't do that all by itself. It does that because people get together and they force it to bend. And that's what we're all doing here together. And all of you out there are a huge part of this. It's been worse than it's been now. I know it's hard to imagine it. Some of us weren't alive for it, but it has been. And Maya's absolutely right. Our democracy is strong, and we are going to be okay because we're all here and none of us are going to give up. So we got to keep fighting through it. We want to, I'm sorry, go ahead, Maya.
Oh no, I was affirming everything that you were saying. I was like, this is beautiful. Yeah, I feel like a warm, fuzzy feeling for the saving of our democracy. That's all.
Yeah. I mean, there are times when things have been really awful, and when everybody gets together and says, no, that's not the direction that we're going to let this country go in. And we push back and we insist that we're going to take leaps toward being the country that we're supposed to be, we're able to do that. And that has happened in the country's history, where we really do move toward equity and equality and really believing that we have to have a participatory democracy and that every vote counts.
Yeah.
And that's where we are now. We got to fight for it.
We do have to fight for it. And wouldn't it be great that if maybe after this voter turnout actually skyrockets and we have a new baseline participation rate, and so people are actively engaged year round as citizens?
Yes. Yeah. With the young people turning out the way they did last time, which was really amazing. We thought it was going to be Bernie or Obama who would finally get younger people engaged. It took Trump. And okay, so be it. That's what it took. But, they are activated now, and it's really exciting to see it happen.
Yeah, it is. Our guest last week, for those of you who tuned in, if you haven't, go check it out. Pam Keith, she mentioned that 1.5 million 18-year-olds will be able to vote in Florida's 2022 election that weren't able to vote before. So we have a special message for them. Save us. Please save us.
Please,
vote.
please.
Go vote. Get engaged. Just everything. We need you.
Grab your friends, grab your grandparents if they've given up. Just get there. And we have one last message from Steve Schmidt tonight that we wanted to share with you. And, he's got important thoughts on why we all have to make sure that we continue this American experiment. It's worth it.
You have to be involved, right? You have to, we would like you to donate to us, but donate to somebody. You have to fund these Democratic candidates. You have to give money. The autocratic movement is flush. You have to be involved. You have to volunteer. You have to be involved in the civics of your community, in your community's life. You have to be involved in politics. You have to practice citizenship. Teddy Roosevelt gave a speech in Paris about this around 100 years ago. And he talked about Republican government, meaning a republic, not the political party. And he said, really, a republic will fail and go down really at the moment where you have more bad citizens than good citizens in a republic.
Yeah. So go forth and be good citizens.
Yeah. Be those good citizens. Yep. We're gonna get there together, everybody. And we are going to be getting together here again next Wednesday at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern time. And we are excited to be back with you. So good night, everybody.
Good night.
We showed you the line between what we should be and what the radical edge of a dangerous anti-American movement wants us to become. It's the line between freedom and autocracy. In 2020, we set out to defeat Donald Trump. Trump lost, but the sick, poisonous ideology of authoritarian nationalist populism lived. Our mission now is to defeat it, to break it, to drive it out of American politics and life, to expose the funders, operators, and conspirators behind the plot to end American democracy, to work with anyone of good faith and strong heart willing to fight against the spreading darkness, to stop Trump's return, to stop Mitch McConnell from retaking the Senate, to stop Kevin McCarthy from retaking the House. It's all on the line, and it's even more dangerous than ever, because if they win, America doesn't just lose, America ends.